So, two men that have always inspired me are Edgar Cayce and Albert Einstein. And you can see that they were contemporaries. They lived during the same period. And I often wondered, did they ever meet? What was the closest they ever got to one another in the same city, in the same state? But and if they ever did meet, what they might talk about. Part of my attraction to these two men might be astrological. Edgar Cayce's birthday is March 18th. Einstein's is March 14th, and my birthday is March 13th. And I'm not a student of astrology, but that's always kind of intrigued me. Well, let's take a look at the religious beliefs of these two men. Edgar Cayce was raised in the Disciples of Christ. He became a sexton of Liberty Church in Beverly at age 10 and was baptized in 1888. As a young child, he had playmates invisible to others. At age 12, while in bed at home, he had a vision of an angelic being, after which he began to exhibit evidence of a photographic memory and an ability to retain large volumes of printed information. Cayce described himself as a devout Christian and denied being a spiritualist or communicating with spirits. He was a member of the Presbyterian Church, in which he taught Sunday school for many years. He read the Bible through for every year of his life. I think we all have gleaned from our understanding of Cayce that he was extremely devout. Carol Sue brought this up yesterday. There was no doubt in his mind about his spirituality, his relationship with Jesus and with God. Now, that's in comparison to Albert Einstein. Einstein was born Jewish. He was deeply religious at age 12, curiously enough, and he used to compose songs in praise of God and chanted religious songs on his way to school. Now, this all changed after he started reading books on science, and that contradicted his religious beliefs. And quoting him, "I soon reached the conviction that much in the stories of the Bible could not be true." And we'll see here in a bit. I think he's talking about the Old Testament. Einstein believed in a cosmic religion that orchestrated the orderliness and sublime beauty of a great universe. He was influenced by Spinoza, who believed in an amorphous, impersonal God responsible for the orderliness of the universe and the awe-inspiring beauty of nature. And here's getting back to Einstein's thoughts about the Bible. "The word God is for me nothing but the expression and product of human weakness. The Bible, a collection of venerable but still rather primitive legends. No interpretation, no matter how subtle, can, for me, change anything about this." Now, when I read that, I was thinking, he's got to be talking about the Old Testament, and I wonder what he thought of the New Testament. And then I found the following quote: "I am a Jew, but I am enthralled by the luminous figure of the Nazarene. No one can read the Gospels without feeling the actual presence of Jesus. His personality pulsates in every word. No myth is filled with such life." So there is an incredible contrast in Einstein's understanding or interpretation of the Old Testament versus the New Testament. Einstein was also a secular humanist and a supporter of the ethical culture movement. He did not believe in a personal God who concerns himself with fates and actions of human beings, a view which he described as naive. "I am not an atheist," preferring to call himself an agnostic or a religious non-believer. He thought that there is a lawgiver who sets the laws of the universe. He did not believe in life after death, adding, "One life is enough for me." And then lastly, I just love this quote from Einstein about man's understanding of God. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many different languages. The child dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but doesn't know what it is. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of even the most intelligent human being towards the word God. So, fascinating insight into Einstein's religious thoughts, and in contrast to the this rock solid beliefs of Cayce. And what was their educational background? And this is also quite a contrast. Cayce received an 8th grade education, and his education ended in 9th grade because his family could not afford the cost. This is what I could find about Cayce's education. I don't know that much about the Beverly Academy and other things that have been mentioned, but he didn't have a very extensive formal education. Now, again, an amazing contrast to Einstein. So Einstein excelled in physics and mathematics from an early age and began teaching himself algebra, calculus, and Euclidean geometry when he was 12. At 13 years old, Immanuel Kant's works, incomprehensible to ordinary mortals, seemed to be clear to him. Einstein recorded that he had mastered integral and differential calculus while still just 14. And if any of you have ever taken calculus, you know that that's quite a feat to understand that at 14. In 1903, he secured a permanent position at the Swiss Patent Office. In 1905, he received a PhD from the University of Zurich. In 1914, he moved to Berlin to join the Prussian Academy of Sciences and the Humboldt University of Berlin. He became the director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics in 1917. So obviously a very, very educated, intelligent man. Now, one of the things that really intrigued me is, where did these men get their information? What was the source of their insight? And this, again, is an amazing contrast. So Edgar Cayce received his information through the subconscious mind of the individual for whom he was giving the reading. And he also received information from the Akashic records. Now, this is the unconscious Cayce. And throughout this presentation, I'm mostly going to deal with the unconscious Cayce and what he brought to this world. I will talk a little bit about my understanding of the waking Cayce and his beliefs, but there are others like Carol Sue who had much more knowledge about Cayce, the waking state man. When asked to explain how so much could be channeled through Cayce, the answer described a universal consciousness that contained all knowledge and could be accessed by any individual mind seeking with the right heart and purpose. Now, Albert Einstein was obviously different. And Einstein incorporated what can be best described as thought experiments. And before I go into that, I just want to bring up, Ulf had mentioned Thomas Edison. So Thomas Edison did his investigation into the universe by hands-on material things. He would take a piece of aluminum and a piece of sodium and put electricity through it and heat it up and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that was hands-on experimentation. A thought experiment is a hypothetical situation in which a hypothesis, theory, or principle is laid out for the purpose of thinking through its consequences. So everything that Einstein came up with was all evolved from his mind. And as you'll see as we go through this presentation, the things that he thought of are just, unbelievable that a mind could go from the material world, the three-dimensional world, into space and time and the speed of light and et cetera, et cetera. The way Einstein described this himself is that imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. So some of Einstein's famous thought experiments are, and you might have heard of some of these. So what would it be like to be in an elevator in space that's accelerating at 32 feet per second squared, which is what gravity is? That's the acceleration of gravity. So if you were in a little elevator out in the middle of space, out in the middle of nowhere, and you were accelerating at that rate, you would feel like you're standing on Earth. So this all went through his mind. And this one is a little bit complicated, but can two quantum systems interact even when the systems are widely separated in space? And this concept is known as entanglement. And physics is discovering that there is some sort of magical connection between particles and quantum systems. So this is perhaps Einstein's most famous thought experiment: is what a beam of light would look like to someone running at the speed of light. And again, who in the world thinks of these things? This is so beyond man's common experience with the material world, but that was Einstein. This might be a legend, but I came across this, that he was inspired after he witnessed a painter falling from the roof of a building, and he thought, I guess gravity does not exist in the state of free fall. Another concept that Einstein came up with was that mass could bend light, gravity could bend light, and his concept was that how would a star appear next to the sun during a total solar eclipse? And they actually had the chance to prove that the light bent during the solar eclipse of 1919. Okay, so Cayce did have a couple of readings that mentioned Einstein. They're not particularly relevant, but I thought I'd throw them in there just to link the two men together. So the first one, so the Cayce readings that mention Einstein, the first one is not particularly material, but somebody asked, if desired, may one obtain life readings on those who have passed on, as George Washington? And then the questioner followed that up with, also on one that is now still in this life without his knowledge, such as Einstein. So a simple reference, nothing material. The next one perhaps is a bit more material. The entity built-in is that, and the language in this is really convoluted and maybe relates to a mind of Einstein's stature, but the entity builded in that of setting up the first study of how that the square of the one equal in the square of the other as related to numbers, and the positions of numbers as related to the stars in the universe, and the relation of one to another. The entity will easily understand Einstein's theory. Few would. So it must have been quite the individual he was giving that reading to. Now, I'd like to talk about some of the concepts that Einstein brought to mankind, understanding of these concepts, and how maybe Cayce's readings on these same issues maybe relate. And there's no answers here. There's no clear understanding of what light is and time and space, as I'll talk about later. But I'd like to introduce the mysteries and the complexities that both of these men brought to these topics. So light. We'll start off with religious references to light. I think every religion has a reference to light, and in the Bible, in Genesis 1:14, now the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. And what did Cayce say? Again, this is all in the couch Cayce, the sleeping Cayce. What is light? That from which, through which, in which may be found all things, out of which all things come. Thus, the first of everything that may be visible in earth, in heaven, in space, is of that light, is that light. Also, when asked how light rays affect health, he replied, "There is no functioning of any portion of the system which functions through the nervous system not affected by rays of light." Or in other words, life itself in manifested form is vibration, of which light is a part. Now get that. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." You are one of those sparks of light. So those are Cayce quotes on light. But let's see what Einstein had to say about light. Einstein's quantum theory of light describes light as consisting of discrete packets of energy, or photons. This revolutionized for mankind the understanding of the nature of light. And again, this was all developed in his mind and through his thought experiments. Now, one of the basic premises that Einstein came up with is that nothing can go faster than light, 186,000 miles per second, an incredible speed. He also determined that light has properties of both a particle and a wave. And he came up with what's known as the photoelectric effect, which is that a photon of light can dislodge an electron from a material surface. And this is solar power. So the solar collector on your roof works via the photoelectric effect. And this gained Einstein the Nobel Prize in 1921. There's some real mysteries of light that physicists don't understand, and they kind of imply another dimension or some other non-tangible or non-discoverable aspects of light. So I don't know if you've heard of what's known as the double slit experiment, but what that indicated, that light has this unexplainable awareness of its surroundings, which must occur faster than the speed of light. And this again comes back to what's known as entanglement, that in some mysterious way, photons know what their environment is. And that's the basis of the double slit experiment, which is a whole nother story. But now, what some of the other kind of amazing things about light and time is that time slows down as something approaches the speed of light. Now, when I say time slows down, this is all relative. We're getting into Einstein's theory of special relativity. But if you are moving close to the speed of light, time slows, someone looking at you, time slows down for the person moving. So in some strange way, um, light exists outside of time, and perhaps this is in the realm of God, that it's outside of time. Um, Also, another interesting fact about light is that because light is moving at the speed of light, it's in some mysterious way, it contains both infinite energy and infinite mass, and that's special relativity. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to talk about E equals mc squared. Everybody has heard this equation, Einstein's most famous equation, certainly. But what does it mean? What's embedded within this equation? Well, E stands for energy. Equal means it's exactly the same. One side is exactly the same as the other. M stands for mass, material, matter. And C is the speed of light. So the speed of light squared. So what this equation is saying is that energy and mass are different forms of the same thing. And what ties them together is an aspect of light, the speed of light. So here's this incredibly simple equation that ties these elements together: energy, mass, and the speed of light. So again, the speed of light is some sort of basic element in this three-dimensional material world that we live in. Yeah, so just going on with the equation. So light then is this mysterious flux or glue which connects the basic elements of the material world, energy and mass. Things with, and this is another really bizarre concept, but things with energy have more mass, be it thermal, potential, or kinetic. So a hot frying pan has more mass than a cold frying pan, or a rock at the top of a hill has more mass than a rock at the bottom of the hill. Now, granted, very little additional mass, but more mass anyway, and that's embedded in E equals mc squared. The energy of stars, of our sun, of atomic bombs, that's all the conversion of mass into energy. So a little bit of mass creates a huge amount of energy. And that's why, the sun is so bright and atomic bombs, unfortunately, are so destructive. So the next concept I'd like to talk about, and that was addressed to some degree by Cayce and Einstein in various ways, is time, space, patience. And I think we've all puzzled with, what in the world does patience have to do with time and space? So from Cayce readings, thus we find his intervention in man's attempt throughout the eons of time and space. For these, time and space become portions of this three-dimensional plane. Here we go again. And what is the other? Time, space, patience. Then what is the Spirit of God? Patience, time, and space in the material understanding. This then is our first premise, that God is, in the material experience of man, time, space, and patience. Also, Cayce, this becomes hard to conceive, yes, in the finite mind, as does the finite mind fail to grasp the lack of or no time. Yet out of time, space, patience, is it possible for the consciousness of the finite to know the infinite? For while time and space are literal only to the consciousness of the finite mind, they are a part of the experience in materiality. And the presentations of same then should be of creative forces as time, space, and patience. Now, Albert Einstein obviously had a lot to say about time and space, And as we'll see, maybe a suggestion of patience. But the special theory of relativity showed that space and time grow and shrink relative to one another in order to keep the speed of light constant for the observer. So this gets back to the speed of light cannot be broken. And what has to change is space and time. And this was such a revolutionary concept for man to grasp. I mean, I don't think any of us can really understand it. And part of the reason we can't understand it is we just don't travel that fast. We don't get anywhere near the speed of light. So again, as I indicated earlier, when we travel through space, time moves a little bit slower and mass increases. Moving at light speed, photons also in some mysterious way contain infinite energy and mass. I talked about that before because they're traveling at light speed. They have to have infinite energy and infinite mass. And then continuing on that concept, so time and space are undefined for a photon since it's traveling at the speed of light. And what does that mean? I mean, what is that? Is that some indication or demonstration of the eternal present, or even God? God is beyond space and time, and maybe somehow light is of that same dimension. This one I thought this shows Albert Einstein's sense of humor, and he really did have a good sense of humor. But when you sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, you think it's only a minute. When you sit on a hot stove for a minute, you think it's 2 hours. That's relativity. And then, so that was the special theory of relativity. Einstein also came up with what he called the general theory of relativity. That was published by him in 1915. And this is also, these are so difficult to comprehend, but that matter bends space-time, which we experience as gravity. All that gravity is curved space-time. Space-time tells matter how to move, and matter tells space-time how to curve. And I'm just going to go back real quickly to this image. So if you imagine that circle in the middle is the sun, a mass, that is bending or curving space-time. And then the gray object going around it, let's say, is Earth. So that is the mass traveling through the curved space-time that the sun generated. So again, very, very, I don't think anybody understands these things, but they're out there. The general theory of relativity also predicted gravitational waves, and that the universe wasn't static, but rather expanding, which led to the concept of the Big Bang. So we've been talking about Einstein's thoughts and understandings of time, space. Well, I wonder what he would have said to Cayce when they were sitting there having lunch, and Cayce said, well, my readings bring up the fact that time, space, and patience are all dimensions of the same thing. You wonder if Einstein would have scratched his head and wondered who he was talking to. But I did come across something that just blew me away with regard to perhaps Einstein's understanding of what this concept of patience might have been as it applies to time and space. So in 1950, Einstein wrote an article that included the following: any individual who should survive his physical death is beyond my comprehension. Such notions are for the fears or absurd egotism of feeble souls. Ouch. Well, this was read by a father who had just lost his 11-year-old son to polio. And he wrote the following to Einstein: and I inquire in a spirit of desperation, is there in your view no comfort, no consolation for what has happened? Am I to believe that my beautiful, darling child has been forever wedded into dust, that there was nothing within him which has defied the grave and transcended the power of death? Is there nothing to assuage the pain of an unquenchable longing, an intense craving, and unceasing love for my darling son? So, what did Einstein have to say about that? He wrote back to this father: a human being is part of the whole world, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. The striving to free oneself from this delusion is the one issue of true religion, not to nourish the delusion, but to try to overcome it is the way to reach the attainable measure of peace of mind. So I just was absolutely blown away by reading this and thinking maybe this is Einstein's understanding of what Cayce was trying to put forward to us with regard to the concept of time, space, and patience. Now, other beliefs that they both shared, and I'm going to talk about this mostly with regard to Cayce's readings, not so much as the waking Cayce, but there is certainly a lot of overlap on some of these topics. Nature is a guide for man. So Edgar Cayce, man is in that position where he may gain the greater lesson from nature and the creatures in the natural world. They each fulfill their purpose, singing their song, filling the air with their perfume, that they too may honor and praise their creator. They each, in their own humble way, are fulfilling that for which they were called into being, reflecting as each soul, as each man and each woman should do in their particular sphere, their concept of the maker. What did Einstein say about nature? Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. Overcoming small s self. Not that self, thine own ego, may be satisfied, but rather that the spirit of truth, as exemplified in the manner, the way the Master, thy Savior, did manifest, may be through thee manifested before and toward thy fellow man. Einstein. The true value of a human being is determined primarily by the measure and the sense in which they have obtained liberation from the small s self. Very, very similar thoughts and explanations. Imagination. And I talked about imagination earlier with regard to Einstein's theories. But Cayce, astrologically, we find latent urgence, especially in the abilities from those influences that might be said to be the guardian forces about the entity, the imagination. And because of criticism, the entity has submerged much that has been beautiful in the experience. And then here's a question posed to Cayce. Is there any other special field that I should take up? Answer: any field that would have to do with the use of the imagination, of course, as writing, as music, as artistic temperament. But the great activity will be the perfecting of that which has been innately in the mind so oft. Einstein, and I read this one earlier, but imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. Do something, keep moving. I was trying to find this reading in the documents, but that is something like go forward or go backwards, but make sure you're moving. But I couldn't find it. But I found one that was similar. So Where the way is prepared, go, begin, do something, don't stand still. For we find, while there are seemingly impediments in the way, considerest thou how little of what has been attained is known by those who have only seen promises, visions, hopes, and the various elements of promise heretofore. And Einstein, again in his beautiful humor, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Fruits of the Spirit, Edgar Cayce. What are the manifestations of the Father? The fruits of the Spirit are the manifestations of the Father. In the earth, gentleness, kindness, the loving word, patience, hope, persistence, and above all, consistency in thy acts and in thy speech. Be ye glorious in thine activity, be ye joyous in thy words. Albert Einstein, very, very clear parallel. The ideals that have lighted my way and time after time have given me new courage to face life cheerfully have been kindness, beauty, and truth. The trite objects of human efforts, possessions, outward success, luxury, have always seemed to me contemptible. I added music after Carol Sue's presentation yesterday. I hope she's in the audience now, because I totally forgot about Albert Einstein's relationship to music. But so, and there's lots of references to music in the Cayce readings. I wish I could have found some other ones. But is there any suggestion that will help Entity in her progress of developing herself spiritually and physically? As we have indicated, as the entity turns more and more through music for the attuning of self, as music becomes the meditation period, the prayer period for the entity. Now, remember that music becoming a meditation period, a prayer period, when we talk about Einstein. So Einstein once said that if he hadn't been a scientist, he would certainly have been a musician. So that's a direct quote from him. And it's just amazing for me to think about, with everything he brought to the world, he might not have been a scientist. He might have preferred to be a musician. And then a quote from him, life without playing music is inconceivable for me. I live my daydreams in music. I see my life in terms of music. I get the most joy in life out of music. So thank you so much, Carol Sue, for reminding me about how Albert Einstein was so in tune with music. Helping others, Cayce. Then in so living and so realizing, may we each become as channels of blessings to others in their disturbed minds, their disturbed bodies, their disturbed desires. For if we would be one with him, it is in helping others, in bringing to them the knowledge of the Christ, that his peace, which is of him, becomes a part of us. For if we would have life, we must give life, that we may have it more and more abundantly. For life is the manifestation of the Father in the earth. This is about Cayce. Early in his psychic life, Cayce received the covenant to remain faithful, to be true to self, and to help the sick and the afflicted. And this is going to be the waking Cayce. He helped countless seekers, certainly in the trance readings, and he often followed this up with letters and meetings with the people that he gave readings for. And throughout his life, he helped others visiting hospitals, jails, churches, and always his family, his friends, and his neighbors. Albert Einstein, only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. That could come right out of the Cayce readings. And this is something that has always been very fundamental to Einstein. He experienced heavy anti-Semitic discrimination while he was in Germany as a younger man. And as a result, when he came to the United States, he worked extensively with leading civil rights activists in organizations in the United States to demand equality and denounce racism and segregation. He used to invite civil rights leaders that couldn't get a hotel room in a city. He would invite them into his home to stay, as a demonstration of his commitment to their cause. He joined in protests, he lectured, and opened his home, as I mentioned, in support of the civil rights movement. And then lastly, Einstein wrote a letter to President Roosevelt in 1939 warning of Germany's potential to develop an atomic bomb. And that was the catalyst for the Manhattan Project. And while he was not directly involved with that research, his theories and insights were certainly critical to the success of developing the first nuclear weapon. Now, I think we would all agree that the project was a success in developing the weapon, but for mankind, it was a huge step backward. Peace by understanding, Edgar Cayce. As man looks upon the world today, there comes that understanding, that manner in which choice and judgments may be drawn, even as he gave to that one who had announced by the authority of the prophets, behold, the Lamb of God that taketh away the sins of the world, who comes to bring peace into the hearts of those who seek to do righteousness in the earth. And in Einstein, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. So in conclusion, I always used to imagine that the other side, whatever the world is after death, was this beautiful, magical, fantastic realm, and that the material world was, it's the material world. It's just, common, just everyday experience. But the more I studied, the more I study about physics and the natural world and explore spirituality as well, the more I've come to realize that this three-dimensional material world that our souls have incarnated into are magical in their own right. They're just this fantastic realm that we maybe underestimate or don't appreciate the full majesty of the realm that our souls find ourselves in. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll turn it back to you, John.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. A wonderful presentation. Oh, there, you already have a question. Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, just to move up a notch in dimensions, I often think about light, and I think of light in the fourth dimension as being only vibration, no mass, not a photon. So from that point of view, do you see that, the fourth dimension is really vibration, and that's how we exist as a energy, a vibration, as would light? So in a sense, a wave would have no beginning and no end, and therefore infinite.
Absolutely.
It's just I'd like to hear what you imagine it to be.
Yeah, and I touched on that in the presentation. I mean, these things, as I indicated in the beginning, nobody understands these things. The physicists didn't understand them, but there were the things they kept coming across. So you mentioned light, and there's this concept of light that light exists as a wave, and then it becomes a particle when it's observed. And maybe some of you have heard this before, but it's called the collapse of the wave function. And what that does, in some mysterious way, a human being has to be involved with the equation. It's the observation. It's a soul observing the wave that then makes it become a particle, and that's how we experience it. That's how the solar collector puts off an electron. So yeah, they're very, very difficult concepts to grasp, but there is that kind of mysterious link, I think you're expressing, that this is beyond the material, three-dimensional material world, that this somehow enters into a fourth dimension, whatever that means, but maybe a God realm. And it's part of, for me, the understanding, again, in some mysterious way, what God is.
Could I give you a definition for the fourth dimension that Cayce gave? He called that an idea. An idea is the closest thing to a fourth dimension. In terms of time, space, and patience, J. Everett Arian described it this way. He said, time is the presentation of a idea. Space being a presentation of multiple ideas together. Patience is the understanding of the purpose of the ideas. And I liked what you said about all of this, and I just thought that could be an addition to your thinking.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
very well done, Steve.
Thank you.
Oh, you have a question?
Yes, Steve, thank you. That is an awesome presentation. I look forward to watching it again and again. And by the way, the reading number you were probably looking for is 3027-2.
Oh, go ahead. 30.
3027-2.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I just enjoyed so many things about it and was making notes the whole time about things. And an interesting thing, thanks to Sydney and Nancy and John and I got to go visit an artist in New York
You heard about that.
who did etchings of both Einstein and Cayce, and so I've got photos of that. I think John probably does too. So if you want to include that in a future version of this, we'd be happy to
Yeah.
give those to you. So
Thank
so
you.
many other things to say, but I'll just keep it short like that. Thank you.
Yeah, just a, an amazing link between those two men, and they came from different perspectives. One was extremely, extremely confident in his religion, and the other, had mixed emotions and mixed feelings, but a common theme. I really found a common theme between the two men. So yeah, thank you.
One more thing, quick thing. I had recently just stumbled across that reading about the man that was told he could understand Einstein's theory and was trying to do some research on him. So
If you find anything,
to have you bring that up again, it just flipped
yeah,
me out.
let me know what you find. I'm curious about that guy.
One thing to add to what Paul was saying, yeah, we had the privilege of meeting the son of an artist who had done etchings of Edgar Cayce and Einstein, and he was also a pioneer photographer, and he actually had 3D pictures of Einstein that he had taken at that time that we were able to see, so that was really cool. Are there any questions or comments for Steve? Any other questions? Ulf.
A little comment only. The sunlight is both a wave and particles. And on the leaves, there are, if you go very close to a leaf, a living leaf, there are a multitude of small openings, and they are eating the particles that goes into the photosynthesis. So that's one dimension of the light.
Like to speak. I thank you very much. This is a topic that interests many of us, I know, but there's two other words that tie together in the same way as underlying with both of these minds. And one is intelligence. Wolf, you just mentioned intelligence with with the leaf and the things that go on there. And there's the unseen world of us, to those of us, that plants and trees actually communicate with each other in their environment. Within our own physical bodies, the intelligence of every cell and its purpose and its function, to know what to do, when to do, how to interrelate with the other things that create this physical vessel that our souls are given the privilege to perform in. And the other word besides that is imagination. And imagination is the other creative element that the mind is referred to in the Cayce work, and as well in Einstein's mind. And these are the things that, to me, bring consciousness, which is what I think we really are as souls, is the element of understanding consciousness, not knowledge, but conscious understanding of who we are is only possible when we can connect to these parts of who we are. Thank you, and I'd love to hear more from anybody else.
Paul.
Just one more quick thing. In one of the Search for God readings, 260, Edgar kind of asked the question, why can't scientists find words in the brain when they say that it is the seat of emotions and activities? So it's you know, kind of it was something that kind of came to my mind of reading that or hearing your talk, that that the scientist doesn't exactly yet have the understanding of things that
What's the reading number?
262-60, one of the Search for God readings.
260.
60. Okay, thank you.
60.
I'll look that up.